are Clint and Allison Dowda from A Double Dose of Dowda, and we are so excited to talk to you today about this idea of classroom management. Because, even if you're the best teacher, you still have those moments where classroom management can be a problem.
Sure.
So what we're going to focus on specifically in this video today is about how important it is for us as classroom teachers to be the ones to handle the behavior in classroom as it happens, rather than calling in an administrator too soon. So I've got a few questions for Clint, because Clint has had experience both as he was a classroom teacher for 10 years, he was an administrator for 5 years, and then he has gone back to the classroom as a teacher. And so he has seen it on both sides. And so we're going to talk to him today. And my first question for you is, why is it important that the classroom teacher is the person who handles most of the behavior problems?
Sure. I think I would start by saying that the most important reason that teachers need to be the ones to handle as much of the behavior in their classroom as they can is because when you call in someone else to handle that behavior, they're now the ones that are in control of the situation, and they're going to be making the decisions about how that behavior is, the consequences that are given out. And so the teacher is giving up that power when they do that. And so they no longer are in control of their classroom. They're giving it up to the principal or assistant principal to make that decision.
Yes.
And so it's always best to keep it in-house. Another reason is because you want to make sure that you are the one controlling it, because that's going to take the least amount of time. It's going to be the least disruptive. You can deal with it on your time. It doesn't necessarily mean you have to deal with it when they're doing it. You can tell them, we're going to have a conversation about this at recess, or you're going to eat lunch in the room today with me, and we're going to have a conversation about this. And so it's the least disruptive to your class if you can just handle those things in your room, which means more time for learning.
That's great. So a question that I have kind of following up on that is, as an administrator, because you do have that unique perspective, what did you learn or notice as an administrator when it came to classroom management happening and going on among the teachers in your building?
Sure. Well, I was in a very large elementary school as an assistant principal, so we had lots of different teachers, and some of those teachers never sent students to the office. I mean, it would be a whole year, and I would never hear from them. And others were sending students daily, multiple times daily. And so I really got to see which teachers were in control of their classrooms and which ones were relying on someone else to handle the discipline in those rooms. So that's a pattern that I saw. So if you want to impress your principal or your assistant principal, try and handle as many things in the classroom as you can. And I think you're going to see benefits in lots of different facets as far as the learning time, the respect the students are going to give you. And so it's just a much better plan to deal with it on your own if you can.
So this idea of, this group of students is the worst group of students I've ever had, and they need to go to the principal more often, that sort of thing. You're saying that maybe wasn't always...
So I would say that is definitely a partial fallacy, at least. The teachers that have good behavior plans in their rooms and have good relationships with their students still had less discipline problems, even with those groups that were kind of famous in the school for having more issues. Now, it did go up with those groups. No plan is perfect. No teacher is perfect. They're going to have issues. But that basically just meant they had more things that they handled in the classroom.
Yeah. So just as, a disclaimer, even if a teacher does have a good behavior plan in place in their classroom, they are consistent with rules and routines and some of these things that we know are important for classroom management. It's not to say that they will never have things that come up. Like, I'm thinking, for instance, so I was in the classroom 11 years before I went to instructional coaching, and I remember sending a student to the office one time because they brought a knife to school. I remember there was another student who I was just so frustrated with. Like, it was one of those students who it was consistently every day something, and I walked in and they were playing in the bathroom and had like their arm fully in the toilet, and they were shoving paper towel rolls or something in the toilet, trying to flood the bathroom. And I just needed to step away. And I actually asked at the office, I called the principal and said, can I just leave, this student up here for a few minutes? I'll come back, but I just need a break. So in those cases, there are times that you need administrator support.
Sure.
So what are some of those situations? Like, what would that look like when it's really appropriate to call in an administrator for help?
Sure. Yeah, there are definitely times when it just gets above your pay grade, and that would be any time that there are drugs or weapons, pornography, and inappropriate things on a computer, or something that would probably go straight to the office. A real fight, and I'm not talking about somebody pushed somebody in the line at the water fountain. I'm talking about a real fight. Those probably need to go straight to your administrator, just because the consequences for that have to be higher, just with zero tolerance and things like that. But if you have questions about that, ask your principal, ask your assistant principal, which things do I need to send to you? And they should be able to give you a pretty firm list as far as things that need to come to them.
Yeah. And so then sometimes as teachers, though, maybe there's something that they aren't quite to those really high levels where they're needing the principal to intervene. But in your experience, is it part of a principal's job to maybe like consult with a teacher if a teacher is consistently having behavior problems with, this student, and they say, hey, can we just talk through this and you give me some ideas? Is that something you can do?
Yeah, I think all administrators would prefer you come to them before it gets to the point where you're losing your cool and doing things that you may regret later on. And so definitely reach out to your assistant principal, reach out to your principal, and just tell them kind of the struggles you're having and see if they have suggestions. Ask them to come observe. You may ask the teacher from the previous grade what they did with that student. I think sometimes that's helpful, sometimes it's not. We don't always need to hear about the struggles they had in previous grades, and because that can cloud our mindset and the chance to for the student to get a fresh start in the new grade level. But if it's a teacher that you trust and you really think could help you, I think reaching out to the teacher from previous grades could also be very helpful.
I think that's a great tip and a great thing to have in mind. So I know that you as an administrator, especially as an assistant principal, a lot of times you would deal with behavior things. And the stories that I got to hear that you would come home and share, you had some...
I chased many a kindergartner around the school.
Yes. So my question for you is, I have always admired and thought you do such a great job with dealing with those kids when they come to you, when they were in trouble. And I think some of those strategies that you used are things that any classroom teacher could use as well. So could you go over just a few of those?
Okay, yeah.
So people can maybe implement some of those things in their classrooms.
Okay. Yeah, some of the strategies that I would use, especially when a student would be sent out of a room because they were just out of control, would be just to give them time to cool off. Don't try and talk to them when they're really upset and angry, because they're just going to say really angry, upset things. And so give them time. Let them kind of come to you when they're ready to talk about it. Because most of the time when a student misbehaves, they have a reason. Now, we as adults probably won't agree that that's a good reason, but most of the time they have a reason for what they're doing and how they're reacting. So give them time. A lot of times I would take them on little things that I had to do around the school. If I had to go deliver something to a room, that student would come with me and we would walk around and talk and just do a little bit of work around the school. And that gave them a chance to get them off their mind what they were in trouble for. And then they can sometimes that opens them up to talking just a little bit more. And then when they're talking, just listen to them. Just give them a chance to tell their side of the story and why they're upset. And then talk to them about what you can do with them and how you can help them react differently in the future. Give them tools. Maybe it's a stress ball. Maybe it's a timeout card where they can give their card to their teacher that they can take a little break. You can also send them with notes to people. Just give them a note and tell them to go run it down to the office and give it to the secretary, and just to get them moving and get them not thinking about being in trouble and what they've done to get in trouble.
Yeah. And you said sometimes those notes that you would send would even have just like...
Yeah, just a smiley face or just a hi or whatever.
So one thing I think that I'll add on to that too is where you talked about listening to them and finding out the reason that they're behaving that way. I think that's really important. But I know that sometimes in the classroom, you can't do that in that moment. Like if you're teaching the class. And so I know there were times that I would kind of walk over to a student because, it's just that proximity is so important to be near students. And so I would kind of get close to them and say, hey, we're going to talk about this in a minute whenever we're going over these problems or, whatever it is, like so that they know and they have a little bit of warning in a calm way.
Sure.
you're going to have a chance to tell me what's going on with you.
Yeah, and the better the relationships that you have with your students are going to allow you to have those conversations with students where you can tell them, hey, this is out of character for you, or this is unacceptable in our room. What are we going to do to fix it? If you have a good relationship with students, then you can have those more real conversations and hopefully, improve the situation.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, the getting to know students. And I think we actually have something coming up soon, a video that's going to be about how to get to know students better and build those relationships. So I have my idea of a fun little game that we're going to play. I know. And so it is, I'm going to just throw out a situation that you perhaps have had students sent to the office for when it's probably something that could have been handled in a classroom. And you tell me, what could a teacher do to respond to that behavior?
Okay.
Sound like fun?
Sounds great.
Okay. So the first one, like you mentioned a little bit ago, that if there are big fights, then yes, send to the office.
Yeah.
But if it's one of those things that we all have dealt with in line where somebody's like shoving someone else in line to go to lunch or related arts or whatever, what should teachers do to respond to that?
Well, and that's going to depend a little bit on the grade level, of course. High school, that's going to look different than elementary. My experience is mainly in elementary school. So with that, I would say, deal with that in your room. Tell the kids, we're going to talk about this during recess today, or we're going to talk about this during lunch today, and you all can both sit up here. And you'd be surprised how quick those students decide they want to work it out and become friends again.
As long as it's during the recess time.
As long as it's during their recess time, especially, yes.
Yes, I totally get and understand that. So how about this next one of just like arguing and bickering between students in class?
Same thing. Like, just make sure that they are, pull them aside, talk with them about it, maybe make them write about it, write an explanation of why that was disruptive. And then I'm just going to have conversations with kids. I wasn't big on just random consequences for students. I was big on, let's talk about what this was and why this was wrong and how we can do better next time.
And I think I would add to that too, and this just feels to me like common sense, but I think it's worth saying, is if you know that you have two students who clash or two kids that things are going on with, just have them separate from one another and just keep one in one place and one in another. And that seems really basic, but I think with all of these behavior things that we talk about, the more you can do on the front end to prevent things from happening, that's going to be really helpful, right? Yeah. Okay. So here's another question, another situation is talking out in class, just blurting out, interrupting. Yeah, how's a teacher handle that?
I was going to say, I hope that's not coming to me because there's not much I can do about it.
Yeah.
A lot of times if they're blurting out, you can just give them the chance, just say, what do you want to say, Michael? Go ahead, tell everybody. And I hate to embarrass kids, but sometimes if the kids want attention, I say give them a little bit of attention and they'll quickly realize they didn't want all that attention.
Yeah. It turns not as cool as they thought pretty quickly.
Yeah.
All right. So last situation I'm going to throw out at you. Students who are not working. Like, I know you had students who would come to the office. You had some frequent flyers for just not doing their work in class.
Yeah, and honestly, there's not a whole lot a principal can do. I mean, we can make phone calls home, but we can't move that pencil for the student. And so if you're sending them to the office if you have just told them they're going to miss recess and they need to go to the office, that's not a big deal. Do make sure you clear that with your principal. They may have other plans. They may just have a lot going on. And so, but there's not a whole lot. We can't make them do it any more than you can in the room. And so a lot of times they went back with hardly much work done, but there's not much you can do about it.
Sure. So on the classroom end of things, like the teacher, to help them get that work done.
I mean, I think they need to reach out to parents. Let the parents know the trouble that you're having and that you believe in the student and know they can do the work, but they're not doing it. And so the parents are going to be your best bet on that, I believe.
Yeah. Well, that's all great advice.
All right.
Thanks for playing my game with me. So that wraps up this video about when to pull in an administrator into behavior issues that are happening in your classroom. And so we've got a couple more videos coming up as well around this idea of behavior and classroom management that we hope you will check out soon. And we hope that you found some great information out of this video.
As always, thanks for watching, and we would love for you to subscribe to our channel. Thanks so much.